Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Why Am I a Mets Fan podcast. I am Ashley Wenskoski. You may notice that I'm joined by a very special guest today on this post MLB Trade Deadline episode. Samantha Croston is on vacation and off today, so instead I am joining you with someone who you may notice has a very similar last name as I do. So, hello, Allie. My younger sister is joining us today. She is interning at our local station in Syracuse, New York, where Sam and I are both sports reporters and anchors. Allie is joining us as a sports intern this summer, has been able to do a lot of work with us, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and has been able to watch these podcasts closely numerous times. So, what better moment than now? What time like the present to bring her on and have her talk a little bit of post Mets MLB trade deadline. Hello, Allie. I will let you have a minute to introduce yourself. Allie grew up a lifelong Mets fan alongside me right here outside of Philadelphia, ironically enough. So, Allie, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Finally on this podcast. I feel like I've been watching it all summer, and like you mentioned it, what better time than the trade deadline to come on here and give my input. So I'm excited to be here. Yeah.
Allie is going into her senior year at Penn State. And ironically enough, if you believe in manifestation, I don't know what you believe in, but Allie and I used to sit in our childhood bedrooms and do fake MLB, essentially podcasts. We acted like we were on a little show when we were kids because we were that obsessed. We would pour over our magazines and we would do stuff exactly like
The
this.
Lindies.
The Lindies, I mean, you got to know about the Lindies. We would do stuff exactly like this, at important MLB moments when the Mets made a trade, the trade deadline back then. Back then, we were talking about David Wright and Jose Reyes. Now we are talking about David Stearns and Steve Cohen Mets. So, all that to say, it is time to get into what the Mets did and did not do at the trade deadline. The New York Mets, and there's not many times throughout their history that you can say this with confidence, did not hold back at this trade deadline. David Stearns did what we were all hoping he would do, and he put them squarely in win now mode with the moves that they made. So let's start with the bullpen. The Mets obviously right off the bat get four players at the trade deadline, two right-handed relievers in Ryan Helsley and Tyler Rogers, and then obviously Gregory Soto. They got him earlier in the week to fortify the lefty options in the bullpen, and they also pick up Cedric Mullins from the Baltimore Orioles to play center field, which we know has been an area of concern for this team. So let's start with the two new flashy moves, right? The Mets get Ryan Helsley from the St. Louis Cardinals. Let's start here. The Cardinals receive Jesus Baez, who is a Mets infield prospect, and then two righty pitchers, Nate Dome, and I believe it's Frank Elisalt. I'm not exactly sure how to say Frank's name, so sorry, Frank. Um, Ryan Helsley from the Cardinals. First of all, you're looking at the Cardinals, a team that's going to sell going into this deadline. Ryan Helsley, to me, I know Rogers was the flashier deal, which we'll talk about in a minute, in part because of who the Mets gave up and in part because of how good he's been. But Ryan Helsley should not go underrated, should not fly under the radar here on anyone's board. He led the majors last year with 49 saves. He's 31 years old. He is a rental. Both Rogers and Helsley rentals. Right now, this year, he had 21 saves for the Cardinals in 26 chances and a 3.03 flat ERA. Obviously, the goal here, Allie, is for him to serve as sort of a setup man for Edwin Diaz. But what do you have to say on the Helsley deal? How big do you feel like that was for this bullpen?
I feel like it was huge. I mean, I think every year Mets fans are looking for movement in their bullpen when it comes down to the trade deadline, especially when they're in an opportunity to maybe make the playoffs. And that's where we're sitting at right now is to try to get key players to try to help them do that. So I think it was a good fit. I think they needed to focus on their bullpen as they always do. They needed someone there for Diaz. We've been seeing Diaz come in the eighth inning way too many times when in reality he really should just be coming in the ninth to go for that save. So I think this is the perfect guy to do that. They added, like you said, a couple names in there, and I think that was a good move to focus on the bullpen as a whole because this was one of their holes coming into the trade deadline. It's where they seemingly focus with a little bit of some more offense coming their way too.
Yes, Helsley, of course, joins the Mets. Like you said, it had been a struggle all year long, right? In those sixth, seventh, even eighth innings to get to Diaz. And so everybody knew that that was the glaring area of concern for this bullpen headed into the deadline. And David Stearns went out there and frontline bullpen relief help was right at the very top of his list. So they get Helsley. By the way, I should add I listed off the prospects that the Mets sent to the Cardinals. No one notable. I mean, if you're a diehard into Mets prospects, you might have known Baez's name. He was a guy that scouts were saying, was athletic, was really a crafty, like top five in the organization guy in terms of athleticism, but he just hadn't really put all those pieces yet together on the baseball field in terms of cracking the big leagues and beyond. Then you get into Tyler Rogers. This was the flashy one. They get him from the Giants, okay? This is the one that sort of rocked Mets world and the trade deadline world in a way. Tyler Rogers to me has to be a top five trade deadline guy. He was a top five guy on the market, right? He's a rental, as is Helsley, so we'll get into that in a minute. Was this worth it for the price that they paid to have each of these guys for 2, 3 months? But you could really not ask for much more than Tyler Rogers in terms of a frontline reliever. He has a 1.8 ERA this year. I mean, he's durable. He's pitches multiple times a week, right? He makes a lot of appearances and he pitches to contact. Rogers, something that's really unique about him is he has this crazy delivery. He has like this unique arm slot angle delivery. I don't even want to call it like submarining because it's not. It's just really interesting. You have to watch a clip of him pitch to really understand what I'm saying. But he has this really interesting delivery, that unique arm angle, like I mentioned, which is always valuable, especially to throw off guys in October, down the stretch, whatnot. And he doesn't walk guys, which is something that we've seen this bullpen really, really struggle with, right? The original Mets bullpen coming into this season has a control problem and a walk rate problem, and that's something that Tyler Rogers does not do. So the Mets get Tyler Rogers from the Giants, who I should add, they're playing this weekend. So Tyler Rogers, I don't know, maybe they were ready in New York. Maybe he did a little walk between the bullpens situation. The Giants receive, and this is where some Mets fans are going to have some opinions, Jose Butto, Blade Tidwell, and Drew Gilbert. Allie, tell me your thoughts on Rogers, but also who the Mets gave up to get him.
Yeah, I think honestly, I like it a lot. I think that Rodgers was a good pull from the Mets. I think they needed another one. I mean, it wasn't just going to be enough to have one, but now having another one and someone who's very dependable. The Mets always have guys that are not so dependable. I mean, you go onto the mound and you don't really know how they're going to pitch in that appearance. But Rodgers is kind of a different story. And I think he switches up because of that weird motion that he has. He's going to help switch up their pitching style. So when a team goes against them, they're not really know what they're going to see because as soon as he comes in, it's a completely different motion and ball game. So I think it's really helpful for the Mets that they picked him up. And yes, like you said, they gave up some people to do so, some of their notable prospects. Jose Butto, there was that viral video that went out when he heard that he was traded. And then he gave out a touching message this morning, actually saying that he was so thankful for Mets fans and he spent much of his career here and he was just super happy for the time that he had. So he was definitely very upset about it, but I think it was time to give him up, and especially Drew Gilbert as well. We were at the Syracuse Mets just last week and he was playing. And he's been there. We got him 2 years ago in the Justin Verlander trade. And honestly, I just didn't see anything notable that was going to send him up to the main ball club soon. So I felt like although they were more notable names and prospects on the Mets, you got to give some to get some.
Yeah, I like that word you use there, right? Because they're notable Mets prospects that your average fan probably does know because they were top 15 prospects. At the same time, they're not sort of those top five guys that they're looking to hold on to, which we'll talk about in a moment. So Tidwell and Gilbert, the Mets' 10th and 14th best prospects, depends on the site you look at. But in that top 15 realm, but like I said, not necessarily top five, top 10. Jose Butto, like you talked about, had a little bit of a Wilmer Flores moment there. That was a big moment of our childhood, let me tell you.
A
The
big
Wilmer,
Flores person.
she's a big Flores guy. The crying on the field when he thought he was traded at the deadline. What year was that? I don't remember exactly what year that was. Maybe 2015 before that run.
2015, 2016, it was right around
2015,
there.
2016, yeah. And then he ended up not being traded, so it was all for naught. And then, of course, that lives on in Mets
Mets
folklore.
hero.
Mets hero, local Mets hero. Anyways, Butto was also captured by the SNY cameras, shedding a few tears in the dugout in the game against the Padres when he had been informed he was traded. And you know what? Baseball's a business, and we forget so often about how much this does affect guys, right? Butto is not a guy that, at least publicly, saw his name being thrown around in some of these trade discussions. Mark Vientos, on the other hand, ends up not being moved, but really was seeing his name fly around in some discussions. Butto, not one of those guys, has been with the organization since he was 19, since they signed him internationally. Of course, it's an emotional moment, but he did say that he was grateful to the Mets and their fans and the organization and is excited to go be a Giant. My takeaway on this is that, like you said, you have to give up something to get something. And I think the Mets, rightfully so, had a few untouchables at this deadline, or you would have seen them make even bigger splashes. It comes as no surprise to me that David Stearns was not enthralled to give up Brandon Sproat, Nolan McLean, Carson Benj, Jonah Tong. The list goes on. Those elite blue chip guys weren't touched. And so we'll get into our overall takeaways in a minute. But I think you have to feel good about that if you're a Mets fan, right? I know you could be upset maybe about Tidwell and Gilbert. We didn't get to see their full potential. Tidwell had a couple of spot starts in New York to start this year. He was like starter number 9 on the 40-man roster. If you're going through from a purely depth chart perspective, he was pretty far down there. Butto was, by the way, out of options. So he was on watch to be DFA'd because if you're out of options and they don't have room for you on the 40-man, where exactly are you going? Control issues, we have seen control issues hold Butto back, I feel like, throughout his career. Not to say that he's, over the hill and won't pan out to anything, but we've seen the walk rate and the control issues really get to him. And then Drew Gilbert is going to be 25 in a month. Can't hit so far. He's been doing better in AAA as of late, but hasn't shown that hitting potential that I think scouts and Mets fans were looking for. And can't play a really great center field, which was really the two things that he was supposed to do. Not to mention, just from a fan perspective, me personally, the Mets have needed a center fielder all year long, right? It has been well documented that we are not comfortable with the sort of Tyrone Taylor, Jeff McNeil platoon that was going on there. And Gilbert's name was never brought up once by David Stearns or anyone else to come up and be that answer. To me, it actually seems like Carson Benj, who was their first round pick, I believe last year or the year before, could be that answer, could be that center fielder of the future. So for now, they let go of Gilbert, they let go of Tidwell. They have not a glut, but a good amount of starting pitching depth that's now at the AA and AAA level. And so to me, it doesn't seem surprising that Tidwell was the odd man out there. Do you have anything else to say on who they gave up, or should we move on to Greg Soto, who we discussed previously, but we'll just give a little oversight on him?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think we can move on. Like you hit it. I mean, they gave up some people, but ultimately they weren't seeing what they needed from them anyway. You may as well try to go for someone who has potential.
Absolutely. It seemed like the ceiling on those guys wasn't quite high enough to want to hold on to them. So those are the two frontline bullpen guys. Those are the two guys that are going to be, your seventh, eighth innings, get you to Diaz. And you finally feel like you have two really solid, durable options to do that because last year that guy was Ryan Stanek. He hasn't been the same Ryan Stanek as last year. Now he's still on the team and he'll still be a part of that picture in the bullpen. But without the, I guess, confidence that he gave you last year, you needed two guys that you felt good about putting in ahead of Diaz. Then you have Greg Soto. We're going to call him G Soto on this podcast because there's another Soto on the team. You all may have heard of him. His name is Juan. Um, he's worth $765 million, I should add. G Soto, not worth $765 million. He joined the Mets a little earlier this week, so you knew that they had locked up the lefty relief option. And we talked about him on the last episode that I did with Sam over Zoom earlier this week. If you want a little bit more of a look into him, you can go back and listen to that. But basically, the Mets needed a durable lefty relief option, and they got it. What sticks out to me, and you can tell me what sticks out to you about these bullpen moves, is that, like we've been saying, Helsley and Rogers are rentals. And to me, especially for Rogers, I wouldn't say it's a steep price, but they paid a price, right? They gave up two guys who were top 15 prospects in the organization. To pay that for a rental shows me that the Mets are in win now mode, and David Stearns is looking to play for this October, not just the years to come. We know that he's building an organization, he's building a program and a team. We've established that. But this to me put the Mets squarely in win now mode.
No, I completely agree. I think it screamed that as well, just because of the focus. I mean, because they focused on the bullpen, did give up a couple of their prospects, which they started to build their farm up and now had to give up some of them, which I mean is part of the game as well to try to get some of these players. But like you mentioned, I think they are playing for this season. They're not out of the woods yet, not even completely close. So I think that with the bullpen additions, they're showing we have talented guys. We have this piece and this piece and this piece, but we're missing just one or two key pieces that can be a whole game changer. I mean, there's still a lot of ball left to play, but they needed something. They weren't going to just make the playoffs or make it far in the playoffs with what they had already. They saw their holes. And other teams can catch their holes as well. But now the Mets pitching depth is looking pretty good.
Yeah, and bullpens win championships, right? I think that's something that people tend to overlook. The Mets rotation, we can talk about the fact that they didn't get a starter in a moment. So obviously there's still some question marks in the rotation, particularly down the stretch. But the Dodgers won the World Series last year with their starters pitching like 40% of their playoff innings. The Dodgers were throwing a bullpen game like every other day, it felt like. But they could do that because of the depth that they had in the bullpen. They had an army of relievers. We've seen that strategy work for teams the past few years. So the Mets really fortified the inning eater arm guys in the bullpen, and especially, I mean, now you add this to, like we've been saying, Edwin Diaz, but not only Diaz, you still have Reed Garrett, you still have Ryan Stanek, you still have Brooks Raley. Now all of a sudden, I mean, this is a bullpen that looks like it could be a top three bullpen in baseball. All of a sudden, in a week's time, that's what the trade deadline can do for you. So, I think it's fantastic. And David Stearns had a post trade deadline press conference on Thursday night. So what we're talking about, he's in win now mode. He made aggressive moves to make the team better. He said, quote, "I don't view this as windows. Our responsibility here is to give ourselves a chance to make the playoffs and ultimately win a World Series every single year. That's what this should be. That's what we're aiming to make it. So I don't view this period of Mets competitiveness in a defined window. I view it as the beginning of what should be a very long and sustained period of competitiveness at the highest level." And then here's what sticks out to me. He said, "I think the moves that we were able to make the last couple of days certainly help that this year without, in a very material way, sacrificing some really high upside special talent that can help us in years to come." So we knew that David Stearns had his untouchables, and that appears to be the case. He held on to all of the untouchables, and he held on to all of the I guess you'd say infield depth that the Mets have. It is no secret that everybody and their mother thought that one or two of Mark Vientos, Brett Baty, Luis Angel Acuna, or Ronnie Mauricio were going to get moved this deadline. None of them were touched.
No, I think it was very smart on his hand. I mean, he put it great in that press conference that he was able to just be competitive long term, and you don't always have to give up the farm. And I think that's something that the Mets have done in the past, where they have given up key pieces to get rentals that, and then nothing really pans out from there. So that's not the case this year. They did give up some people and get rentals, but they didn't give up anyone that really they think is going to be impactful long term. So I think if you're a Mets fan, overall, that this is a win, especially when it comes to the bullpen.
I totally agree. And we've always seen Stearns be, or not always, we've seen him have a tendency to be aggressive like this, but without being reckless. And that to me, we'll see where this takes them. We'll see if it was enough. Only time will tell. But that to me is the sign of a good GM who doesn't really get swayed by reactionary emotions, right? So they fortify the bullpen. That's all fine and good. Also, they got their center fielder. A man by the name of Cedric Mullins is headed to Queens. The Mets traded with the Orioles for Mullins. Of course, Mullins is a guy who's been around the block. He's been in the league a while. He was an all-star in 2021. He was the longest tenured player on the Orioles. Um, in all likelihood, this moves the roster around a little bit and it moves the everyday lineup around a little bit, right? Because now you have a traditional center fielder back in center, put Mullins in center most of the time. That slots McNeil back to second base. He was really playing a lot of the mop-up duty in center when they didn't want to start Tyrone Taylor out there. Then that brings Ronnie Mauricio. I think the Mets are high on Mauricio and want to see the potential that they can give him. And I think he's going to get a lot of playing time down the stretch. Of course, Brett Baty will as well. And you still have Mark Vientos. Mark Vientos, on the record this week, has seen a decrease in playing time. So they didn't give up any of that infield depth Luis Angel Acuna was optioned down to AAA Syracuse today, which is really not surprising. He did seem like the odd man out of those four. But you still have Beatty, Vientos, Mauricio to incorporate into your lineup every day with now McNeil slotted back to second base. Do you think it's a problem that the Mets didn't deal one of those four, or do you think it's okay?
No, I think it's okay. I mean, if you don't have to give up one of them, don't. And they weren't forced to. I mean, it's kind of a little bit surprising. I think so. I think that I really thought it was going to be Acuna, and I know Beatty's been on the chopping block. It feels like every year is like we need to see a little bit from him at the trade deadline, and then we do, and then he sticks around, and then we have the same problem the next year.
It's
Um,
Groundhog Day with Brett Beatty.
it is. It is. And you know what? He's seen more time in Syracuse that he's up and down. He's up and down. But
He knows Syracuse, New York quite well.
well, he was just the case like that he was going to come in all gung ho, but then Mets got so many other guys. Like I do agree with you that now they might have too many guys on the field in total, but that's not a bad problem to have. If you don't have to give up one of your guys that you're thinking about putting in the lineup, you can use to change your lineup around. I wouldn't say that's a problem.
And more than likely, I think, we'll get into it. Maybe this offseason, the Mets really do finally decide between, Mauricio and Vientos. They decide if they're comfortable with Vientos DHing more often. They decide what they want to do with those three. But for now, we still have all three of them. Acuna, welcome back to Syracuse. It's great to see you again. Um, Cedric Mullins, in terms of Mullins himself, I like it because he adds speed, he adds stolen base potential, which I always like to make your team more athletic, right? Faster on the base pass. He's speedy out in center field. He's going to get to everything. I think he's just a well-rounded player. And you know what? He's not the flashy name in terms of a man by the name of Lou Bob Jr. over there on the White Sox, who was going to cause them to mortgage everything. I mean, the rumors were out there. No one can know for sure, but it seemed like the White Sox wanted a package of Mark Vientos, maybe Acuna too. He was going to cost more, right? The White Sox wanted more for him. So to get Mullins and to not give up, what they would have had to give up for Lubob, I think is a great pickup. I think Mullins was worth it for the price, absolutely. He's an upgrade in center field defensively, no matter how you look at it. He did have sort of a slow start to this season, but he had a really strong July. He's hitting like 290, 346, 522 in July, making his overall numbers really bolstered his overall numbers this season. And here's two facts about him that I like in particular. So this is something that always comes up when guys get traded. Okay, what are their numbers at their new home ballpark? Could it be fluky? Did he play at Citi Field often being a member of the Orioles? No. However, he is hitting 429, his career batting average at Citi Field with a OPS 1.026 OPS at Citi Field all time. That to me means good things. Also, Cedric Mullins against lefty pitching this season. He has 84 at bats against lefties. He's hitting 289, 886 OPS, 3 home runs, 13 RBIs. And the Mets have been plagued by lefties this season. They're hitting 226 as a team against lefties overall this year. So to bring in a guy that might give you a threat in your lineup against a lefty is only a good thing as you head into the postseason. What do you like about Mullins and the Mullins trade?
I like it a lot. I think his batting average, like you said, especially against lefties, is really valuable because, again, here the Mets are just looking for an extra piece to their puzzle, and all of these guys are bringing just a little bit something that they didn't have before. But what I really like is his stolen base potential and his potential just to get a little bit of an extra hit here, extra hit there, because you don't always have to be the flashy guy who hits home runs. I mean, we have Juan Soto, we have Pete Alonso. But a guy like this is going to bring more than that. It's more on the box score of bringing in RBIs and stealing an extra bag, getting yourself into scoring position. So I like that he's versatile and just a guy that's going to be sneaky good. And then all of a sudden, the Mets are winning all of these games.
I totally agree. And I think the Mets were looking to move the needle in terms of pitching. Not that they weren't looking to move the needle in terms of a center fielder, but you said it. The Mets have a lineup that right now on paper and off paper, right? I mean, the Mets are in first place in the National League East. They didn't get there by accident. They're in first place in the NL East with a Francisco Lindor and a Pete Alonso who have been sound asleep for a good 2 months at this point. And Juan Soto, who was not sound asleep, but was, I guess, underperforming for at least the first few months of the season. The Mets have those big three. They have McNeil, who's been hitting as of late. They have high upside, high ceiling guys like Mauricio. I think getting Mullins in center field was less about what he brings to your lineup, more about the fact that you just wanted wanted a traditional center fielder, and now you have it, and you added some athleticism on the side. I think the Mets moved the needle in a bigger way in terms of their bullpen, which is exactly what they needed to do. David Stearns was only making tactical moves that he felt like are actually going to improve this team to becoming not just a postseason contender, but a World Series contender. All that to say, all that to say, the Mets did not obtain a starting pitcher. Now, I'm going to ask you your opinion here in a minute because some Mets fans are really concerned about this. I think you can take it one of two ways. If you think about the postseason, right? Okay, the playoffs, you need a solid 3 to 4 guys. Right now, that's Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, and David Peterson. Pretty much no questions asked. Then maybe with this nice bullpen that you have, you're throwing somewhat of a spot start, similar to what the Dodgers did last year. Bullpen game for that fourth game. Maybe it's a combination of Clay Holmes because they start to limit his innings. They throw Clay Holmes in there. They throw Rogers in for a more long relief. They can get a little craftier with it. Of course, it also brings up two guys by the name of Brandon Sproat and Nolan McLean. Because in my opinion, a big reason that the Mets did not go out and pay a lot, they did not mortgage things for a starter, was because they're pretty confident that either Brandon Sproat or Nolan McLean are going to provide them with some big league innings this year. What are your thoughts on them not getting a starter?
I would have liked to see a starter. I think Mets pitching is always a concern, and usually it is more focused on the bullpen. I do like the big three that they have. Currently, I don't think that you needed to go get someone magical out there, but I also think as a Mets fan, you should be hopeful. You should be hopeful that they see the potential in Sprout and these other guys down there, that they didn't think they had to focus on that. Because as we mentioned it, the Mets do think that they're going for this season. It's not like they're giving it up or anything like that. And so they think that they have the talent to do so already in their prospects. I think honestly, I would think it would be Sprout. I think he's gotten innings down in AAA and also seeing a little bit action up there as well, but I think he's ready. I mean, we were at the game and we even talked to some Mets fans and they said they're ready to at least give it a try at the very least.
Yeah, we were talking to Mets fans at AAA Syracuse a couple weeks ago, and everybody is in agreement that it's high time to see Brandon Sproat in this Mets rotation. Now, of course, they're not going to call him or McLean up until they need him, or Jonah Tong, although I'd be a little surprised just because Tong's still in Double A if he surpassed the other two. Sproat has been phenomenal. He 95 innings pitched this year. He has his ERA down to 4.07, which I do recognize does not pop off the page, but that is after enduring a hellish first month to the season. I mean, his ERA was he's been coming from behind with that ERA, let's just say. He has a .55 ERA in his last 6 starts, 39 strikeouts and 33 innings pitched. I mean, his velocity is good. He has that strikeout rate. He has looked fantastic, and I think the Mets were really looking to see that from Brandon Sproat, a guy who was the #1 prospect in their system last year and is still top 5 in the organization. Nolan McLean also has been doing great. So I think that, and David Stearns had a quote here in his press conference after the trade deadline. I would be really surprised to not see one or both of those guys in New York down the stretch. David Stearns said, "We have confidence not only in the starters who are here, we're also pleased with the development of how some of the guys in AAA are progressing. We understand that they could, maybe not definitely, but they could be part of the mix going forward if needed." I don't think you can understate the quiet confidence that the Mets feel there to not feel like they had to go out and get a starter. Now, the other side of this, just to play devil's advocate for a minute, is that both guys, all of them, right? The minor leagues have a shorter season. So none of these guys maybe are going to have the stamina to get to October. That's another sort of risk and gamble that you're taking. Nolan McLean pitched 109 innings last season. That was his most ever. He's at 104 right now. That means one more start. Nolan McLean is matching his innings limit from last year. Jonah Tong, the most he's ever thrown is 113. He's at 92. Brandon Sproat, the most he's ever thrown is 116. He's at 90. You're seeing where I'm going with this. All of these guys are 2, 3 starts away from throwing the most innings they've ever thrown in their career. Now, that's also just growing pains. You have to get past that at some point. You have to make that jump to the major leagues and to, having that stamina and ability to go into September and October. But I would just say watch out for that because I think it means the Mets are going to get crafty. Maybe they call up Sproat and McLean in really limited doses. Maybe, like I said, Clay Holmes comes out of the rotation traditionally, especially since he's struggled lately, and sort of combines with those guys to throw, I guess you could call it a bullpen game, but just just throw a bunch of arms at the problem in one game. So they don't get a starter. That's good news to me if my name is Brandon Sproat or Nolan McLean. They were in on Merrill Kelly. Buster Olney was saying on ESPN. The Diamondbacks ended up trading Kelly to the Rangers. Obviously, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and complain. If they would have gotten Merrill Kelly, that would have been awesome. But clearly, the asking price was beyond what David Stearns was comfortable with. Something interesting that did happen today, a little bit and a bop, is that the Yankees released Marcus Stroman, who has a over 6 ERA this season. And the Mets signed him to a minor league deal earlier today. So, hey, does Marcus Stroman come back in some sort of cameo? I don't know. What I do know is that in the postseason, you need 3 or 4 durable guys who it seems like they're on a path to, feeling confident in. And then also, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with all of this depth, right? You have Sproat and McLean knocking on the door. You have Tong knocking on the door. Now you have Marcus Stroman in your minor league system. No one forget, Tyler McGill has been elusively injured for months, and so has Paul Blackburn. Allegedly, they were trying to move Blackburn at the deadline, but nobody wanted him. Shocking. I said it months ago, send Paul Blackburn to Siberia. Well, Siberia didn't even want him, okay? All that to say, all that to say is they have a lot of inning eater guys. You even have like Brandon Waddell in Syracuse. They're not going to need all of them. They have the depth that I feel like they need to make a deep run down the stretch and into the postseason. I think the rotation has its question marks, particularly if Manaya and Senga, God forbid, have another health concern, then you're looking at a different picture. But for now, the depth is there, and you feel more confident about the bullpen if these guys are starting 5 innings a night, 6 innings a night, in comparison to how you felt a week ago.
And I think the depth is a super big thing, especially when it comes to this time of the year, because like you mentioned it, injuries can pop up out of nowhere. And a playoff run, you just have to have guys who are almost like backup guys. They're on the bench ready to go if anything happens, because not everyone's going to play their best ball game every day. And when it comes down to pitching in particular, you can't have them even have a bad day. So once you start to see the warning signs of maybe a bad inning or a few, you need to get them out of here. And I think this depth allows them to do that and fall back on someone and say, hey, we're not just falling back on one guy, but we have 4 arms to throw at the problem.
You can never have too much pitching. Everybody knows it. Even if it seems like you have a glut of starters, a glut of relievers, you can simply never have too many. And that's a lesson that the Mets even learned earlier this year with a guy like Griffin Canning, with Senga getting hurt again, the whole 9 yards. Frankie Montas, forgot about him. He's easily forgettable. He's in there too. So how would you, final question here, and then we'll wrap up, because we've been yapping here for a minute about the trade deadline. How would you grade this Mets trade deadline?
I honestly was super happy with it. Like we said, I think the only missing piece really was maybe a starter, but no one caught their eye. So I'd give it an A minus. I think they got everything they needed to do. They gave the depth, which is something that the Mets really needed, especially when it came to the bullpen. They hit all their marks. They got their bullpen straightened away. They got their center fielder guy. Yes, you could say they needed another starter, but like we said, the big three have been pretty solid as of late. So I think what they needed to do, they filled the holes and are now just ready to prepare for the rest of the year.
I totally agree. I was gonna say A minus as well. You read my mind. It's almost like we're related. I think A minus, right? Not an A plus, because an A plus would have been like, okay, you knocked my socks off, but an A minus. You did everything you had to do. You fortified the areas you had to fortify, and now you feel confident about each, I guess, area on the team, starters, relievers, position players, headed into down the stretch and headed into the postseason. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Forgot to mention that at the beginning. Sam and I will be back next week with our regularly scheduled programming from the studio. Don't you worry about it. We will be at that on Monday or Tuesday next week. For now, Allie and I are actually headed to the Mets game tomorrow. We are making our yearly pilgrimage to Citi Field. So really excited to see the Mets out of this deadline. We are excited for a few things because we don't get to go to Citi Field that often. So we are excited to have that experience, excited to see them play the Giants, which I should add, Tyler Rogers' former team, and maybe who's Jose Butto is out there sitting in the opposing dugout. Any more thoughts from you, Allie, on the trade deadline, tomorrow's game, anything?
I'm excited to get a cookie bucket.
Right. She's excited to get a City Field cookie bucket. It's been, I mean, we've talked about this for like the whole year. She's pumped.
I'm a big ice cream hat person. I collect them, but I have City Field ones, but the cookie bucket, it's calling my name. And I am excited to see how they do after the trade deadline, but I'm more focused on the cookies.
I'm excited to get an $18 cocktail and a Mets cup. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Allie, for being our special guest today. Who knows, maybe we'll see her in more cameos later on this season or whatnot. But thank you all so much for joining us. Leave in the comments how you would grade the Mets trade deadline, what you liked with what they did, what they could have done better, any thoughts regarding the trade deadline and regarding the rest of the season now for the New York Mets. Thank you so much for joining us. Like, comment, and subscribe. Goodbye, and thanks for watching.